Welcome back to another UNC Tar Heels football recruiting podcast here on TarHeelIllustrated.com. And if you're checking us out over on our YouTube channel, Tar Heel Illustrated, this is THI publisher Andrew Jones. And joining me is our very own director of football recruiting. And she is the publisher of NCPreps.com, which is also in our network here at Rivals.com and Yahoo Sports, Miss Deana King. And Deana, we continue your series looking ahead at UNC's class of 22 targets with the dead period ending Monday at midnight. We talked about the Wild West with the transfer portal when basketball season ended and even football. Well, it's going to be the Wild West in recruiting because coaches and players, prospects have not seen each other face-to-face in 15 months. Now they get to. So we're looking ahead at the kids that North Carolina is targeting, each of the different position groups for the class of 22. We've narrowed it down because it's a fairly narrow list to begin with, because we right now don't see them taking more than 14 kids in this class. So we're going to look at defensive line now. We've completed the offensive side of the ball. Now we begin on the defensive side of the ball. Defensive tackle, 4 kids, Deana. This is not a big net. This is a pretty small net, but there's some big fish inside that net, the biggest of whom we will conclude this podcast with. So let's start with Dennis Sutton, 4-star kid from Owings Mills, Maryland, which is in the D.C. area, 6'5", 235 pounds. He's generated some attention here lately, and Adam Friedman of Rivals had a piece a couple of weeks ago about him. So what is the latest with him and with the Tar Heels?
He's coming off a really good performance at the Rivals camp up north. So him being from Maryland, Penn State, they try to dominate that area. And, I would think Penn State's in a good shot with Sutton. Ohio State's trying to make a move on him as well. But he does have some interest in UNC. I would think, just the perception that Mac did very well with defensive linemen. So he wants to visit UNC, but I have not seen any info when that visit would possibly take it. I believe it would be unofficial, but right now it looks on paper like a possible Penn State Ohio State duel for this kid.
I also might want to throw in there real quickly that even though Maryland's no longer in the ACC, and it's been a while now, believe it or not, 2013, Terrapins left for the Big Ten, DC's still an ACC area. The ACC culture and history runs deep there. And let's not forget that, he's in Owings Mills, which is on the other side of DC, across Potomac River from Virginia. Virginia Tech get a ton of attention in the Washington, D.C. area. So even though for a long time, Carolina was considered almost a local up there because they had the second largest alumni chapter, which still does outside of North Carolina, is in the D.C. area. But kids that are up in that area still look at that as being an ACC country and UNC as being not that far away. So to some people watch this, they may say, boy, a kid from Maryland, why would he be interested in UNC? Well, he's probably grown up hearing about UNC, people talking about UNC because they're quite prevalent up there. Bryson Jennings is from Virginia, which is obviously in the ACC footprint. Midlothian, Virginia, which is just outside of Richmond. Carolina has actually had some success in both sports getting kids from that area. Kenny Williams from that area. Tyler Powell from that area, defensive lineman at Carolina under the Larry Fedora regime. So what is the latest with Bryson Jennings? 6'5", 220 pounds, 4-star kid.
Long, slender defensive end that could excel in Bateman's defense. He loves those tall guys put on the edge and everything. But he's scheduled to come down to take official visit in mid-June around the 18th. His dad played I believe he played at Virginia Tech. So I just think this is going to come down. Carolina has a good shot, but I think this is going to come down between them, UNC and the Hokies, and to see, if Bryson, if he feels pressure to stay and play for Virginia Tech, where his dad was, good, or move and make his own name and somewhere else. So, but yeah, he's got that official visit set for UNC and Carolina. That's the same time Fisher Anderson is going to be there, and another Virginian that we talked about earlier on offense, Andre Green. So some really good dudes coming in for UNC right now on the 18th.
Tar Heel Chris Collins is also from the Richmond area. I got to be honest with you, I don't know a ton about Bryson Jennings. We haven't talked a lot about him. So is the interest level strong enough from the UNC side that if, let's say, he won to pop in mid-June, that they would take it?
Yeah, I think they would. Of course, with 14 right now is what we think. They've already got 4 committed. That leaves 10 spots, and you got to be – we know 2 that's got a spot no matter what. That's those 2 5-stars. We're going to talk about one later. But that leaves 8 more spots, and they got some running backs that they like, wide receivers, and then they got some loaded defensive back targets that we'll talk about. So, yeah, I could see them taking because he would probably be the lone defensive end kid that they would take.
Because in this group, we're doing defensive line, but there's only one true tackle in this group. The next kid on the list is not a true tackle, another long, athletic kid, a basketball player as well. DJ Wesley, I believe is how you pronounce his last name, 4-star kid from Boonville, Missouri, 6'6", 235 pounds. I sent you a photograph before we did this podcast of him shooting a jump shot in a game. He scored 23 points in high school. Got nice form. Usually defensive linemen don't have the nicest form when they play high school basketball.
They're more the paint monsters, you know.
Yeah, this kid's got some finesse to his game. So I would imagine just off of that he's pretty successful in basketball. Again, an outside kid. Mac loves basketball players that play up front because they have really good footwork. They're laterally agile, and I would imagine that's what this kid is as well.
Just a great athlete, and we know how Mac wants to recruit these multi-sport athletes. I mean, he can field a really good basketball team from the guys that he's got on his roster at UNC. But DJ, he's got a lot of national teams after him. He's interested in visiting UNC. He's got a lot of the Florida, Miami, Southern Cal, Notre Dame. So he's got Alabama and Clemson. All these schools are, really interested in him. And for UNC to possibly get an unofficial visit from him is huge. I mean, he's out in Missouri. Another kid that we said west of the Mississippi that Mac has offered and said that they would go outside the state if they seen, or the recruiting blueprint, if they seen a kid that they really like.
Well, obviously, you think about his offer sheet's fascinating because he basically can go anywhere in the country he wants, any part of the country just about that he wants when you look at his offer sheet. As far as Carolina and this young man goes, do you sense that there's a pretty strong interest, or is this kid just still filling out the myriad of offers that he's getting, the options that are out there for him, not just with the school that he goes to, but as I noted, lifestyle? I mean, if you're in Missouri, you can go to LA, you can go to Miami, you can go anywhere up north, you can go to a place like North Carolina, anywhere in Florida. Do you know kind of anything about what will factor into his ultimate decision-making process when he starts narrowing this thing down?
I think Mac is slowly making North Carolina a brand, with them jumping from 2 wins to 7 and then 8 and this past year, and going to the Orange Bowl and playing a Texas A&M and a national program. You got potential Heisman Trophy candidate in Sam Howell. You played a freshman that was supposed to be in high school at cornerback the last 3 or 4 games. So North Carolina's trending. I think, we've said it numerous times, Mac wants UNC to be the cool place to be. And, Carolina's possibly looking cool to some of these kids. they had that unique color. That's the only color that you can, see that color, you automatically know what team that is. So some of these kids, they're looking at UNC at a whole lot different than they would have years ago.
If you're the cool place to be, that would translate to a kid from any of the 50 states. That if you're cool for kids here, you're cool for kids in other parts of the country too. Travis Shaw, I would imagine Carolina fans would think it'd be really cool if they were to land Travis Shaw, 5-star kid out of Greensboro, Grimsley High School, 6'6", 325. We don't really need to give the bio of Travis Shaw. Everybody watching this video knows who he is. Everybody on our site knows who he is. But you know him pretty well. You've known him for a long time. I'm going to let you take it from here. You just kind of roll with it. Tell us what's going on with Travis Shaw, your thoughts about Travis Shaw, and I'll kind of, weave in here at some point when I have a question that pops up. Because there's a lot on your mind about Travis Shaw.
As you said, 5-star, 6'6", 6'7", 330, 340, just a one of Deana's words, ginormous human being. And he's not, and he's like solid. I mean, some kids can be top heavy and have skinny legs. No, he's solid all the way. Kid, saw him at camp last year, and he's just a different animal. He went to one of our camps, and with him, of course, he was the most highly ranked prospect at the camp. But he brought a teammate with him, and he wanted his teammate to do well. So I think Travis actually backed off his motor son to let his buddy excel, and he did win. His teammate did win the defensive line MVP, and Travis was the first one to yeah. So
let me cut in real fast because I want to hit on that real fast. Then you keep going. I don't like to interrupt too much, but I'm going to this time. When that happened, you talked to me that night. You called me up. I think you were on your way home, and you're like, "Andrew, he's such a good kid. Whoever gets him, they're getting themselves a good kid." That stuck with you, and I knew I was going to ask you about it if you didn't bring it up because I remember that too, and that made an impression on you. And you're not the only one who knows he did that. Because of your reporting that he did that, a lot of other people, coaches and staffs around that are recruiting him, they know that as well. And I think that in and of itself is another layer to what Mac's looking for. He doesn't want kids that are going to, he doesn't want to deal with issues or anything like that. And I think that when you put exclamation marks next to a kid's name, that added a couple of exclamation marks next to Travis's name.
And another thing, before the camp, I interviewed him, and he had just come out with his top 13, and, Carolina was on it, Georgia, Clemson, Virginia Tech, Tennessee, Ohio State, Auburn, Florida, who's who. And then that 13th school was North Carolina A&T. And, I asked him about it, and he said, being from Greensboro, North Carolina A&T has done a lot for the city of Greensboro. And he said, I'm treating them like the other ones. They are legitimate. I'm looking at them. They, like I said, they've done a lot for Greensboro. They've helped out, and I'm considering them. A lot of people would just laugh like, well, what in the world? But I believe him. And the type of character he is, I do believe him. And so, he's not narrowed his list down or nothing. He's been kind of quiet through this whole spring because his goal was to lead Grimsley to a state championship, and by golly, they did it. And they did it in Kenan Stadium. They beat Cardinal Gibbons at Kenan Stadium a few weeks ago. And so now he will start the process of deciding to trim down that list, visits. I did speak to his coach, Darryl Brown, a few days ago. Travis kind of got nicked up in the state championship, kind of hurt his shoulder. So they're gonna. I think he's supposed to get that checked out. So he's probably not going to do anything this summer. He's a franchise type kid, and I kind of weary about saying that about a junior in high school, but he's elite. He is a superstar. He's a superstar now, but he's a superstar in the making that I can't wait to see what he does at the next level and beyond, because I mean, he's really great. And another thing, he's a great leader. I think I sent it to the group chat. I believe it was the state semifinals. They were down to Butler by 2 touchdowns, and Travis was over on the sidelines, just not mean or nothing, but just talking to his teammates like, come on, guys, let's go. We're not out of this. Being the ultimate team guy, being the ultimate team leader. And he said, we worked too hard to not get to our goal. And if they didn't come back and beat Butler at the very end of the game. So that tells me a lot about him, that he's a team player. I'm sure his stats could have been a lot more, but a lot of teams focused on him, and his teammates, they racked up numbers, because it would take a couple of guys if they could even control him, because you watch him in games, he was running down these little running backs. And when a 6'7", 340-pounder can do that, that was just impressive.
There's such a quick turnaround. They got to dive into their fall season. And it really is no point for guys like him to do much this summer. Just stay in shape. Don't need to go out and compete.
Getting back to him personally, he was at the spring game. Pretty big deal that Travis Shaw comes and it's raining, and he's got great relationships with a few of the guys. Miles Murphy, a fella, Greensboro kid. He knows Javari Ritzy and Rah from they're right there in Kernersville, Winston area. So he knows a lot, and he always talks about relationships. We hear that a lot when you talk to kids about Carolina, the family. And I've heard it with our being involved with the VTO, because there's several UNC guys that are instructors in there, and they're brothers and family, Yeah. I said in my little on the trail thing about Javari Ritzy showing up at the one in Rocky River supporting his little brother, and Ryan Houston, the former running back at Carolina, Quan Sturdivant, former linebacker. They were a couple that were there, and they're like, man, this is what Mac's bringing in now. Woo! Said I can start bragging about my Tar Heels now, but it would be I would say Landon Travis Shaw would be the feather in Mac's. That's the kid. That's the type of recruit that if Mac lands can turn the tide, can start generating more national elite guys to UNC. If he can beat basically Clemson and Georgia on the recruiting.
One other part about this, we've talked about 4 defensive linemen. That's all we're going to talk about in this podcast. He's the only tackle.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think this is really a theory. I mean, there's a pretty obvious reason why that little net is just around him when you're talking about the interior guys.
It's saying, Travis, you're our one and only target. We want you. He said it. The whole staff's recruiting him. I don't know how many there are. 10 coaches. Heck, you probably got Phil Longo. I think Coach Longo's area is up and around Greensboro. You got your offensive coordinator recruiting. Lonnie Galloway's originally from that area. So Coach Cross, you got everybody. You got everybody wanting Travis Shaw because that kid right there, he would make Carolina Tar Heel Nation just jump backflips.
Yeah, in another year, if they were taking a lot more.
The thing is, I would like if Travis Shaw committed UNC, I would like to see what this is an inside joke. I would like to see what Kevin Roy does.
I wouldn't. If this was a typical year and they were taking 22 to 25 kids, there would be more tackles on this list.
Yeah.
As we've noted throughout this series that we're doing. Right now, we kind of see it, between 10 and 14 is more like on the 14 side. If they went past that, there would be other circumstances that would fuel that. I think that if they went to 14, that they would make room for a 15th, if the 15th was a Travis Shaw or a Zach Rice. But this is going to be a smaller class. So, like we keep using that term, cast a net. It's a really, really small net at tackle, not a big one even along the whole line in general. So Travis Shaw's the guy. There are some other targets that they've talked to. There's some relationships there, but I think this is Travis Shaw, and then there's a cavern before anybody else.
There's. And
by the way, hold on, and justifiably so. North Carolina's stated mission is to be in the CFP, to be one of those kind of programs. And if you look at how some of those schools recruit, they do that too. This isn't like it was several years ago where there's 55 defensive tackles being offered. And I'm not criticizing what the prior staff did. That's just the way that it was. There's a new method here to the approach. And this is a perfect example of how their vision's coming clearer and clearer into focus. And we're seeing the way they recruit as a result of that.
You mentioned the 14, and it's a very select group, because when I sent you the list, you're like 4. I'm like, yeah, there's just 4, but there's like 3 defensive ends and a defensive tackle. Now, I'm not saying, with Carolina, with North Carolina playing spring football, this coaching staff couldn't even go out and see these 22 kids. Maybe some sleeper kids, some diamonds in the rough. They want to see these kids in person. Now, their camps are coming up in June. There may be some targets pop up out of these prospect camps, and if they have their Showtime camp. Yep. We don't know yet, because we're still gathering info as well. So these are 4 that I singled out that have been publicly noted that UNC was in their possible plans or top schools or whatever. So
anybody who follows recruiting understands it's a very fluid thing. And when you're dealing with
limited guys that people are like wondering, like, why Carolina offered them? Well, they've probably not seen them personally. And Mac has said, there's kids that want to commit to this coaching staff, and the coaches have never seen them in person.
Well, that's going to change here in the next month. So, all right, we're just 4 kids for defensive line, but it's very interesting. Obviously, Travis Shaw is if they got Travis Shaw and or Zach Rice, that would just be another sign that the trajectory continues to go straight up for this program since Mac took over 2.5 years ago now, believe it or not. She's Deana. I'm AJ. Tomorrow we've got linebackers. Then we're going to do secondary. We're going to finish out this series before the dead period ends Monday at midnight. Keep coming back. Thanks for stopping by now, but keep coming back.